everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
My Hero Academia, The Beginning Without an End, Chapter 100 to 110, Judgment Begins 1724 words, what the hell is this? Hawks shouted. For a moment no one spoke. Then one of the police officers nearby said in a shaken voice, "Are they zombies? Are they?" Everyone listen. Endeavor roared both to the heroes around him, and into the communication channel. Do not let them bite you or injure you. Whatever this is, it's acting like an infection. The response came almost instantly through the comms. Sir Night-Eye spoke, you are permitted to use lethal force if necessary. Priority 1 is avoiding infection by Junsei's power. We cannot afford to lose more people to his side. Hawks landed on the pavement again while saying, then I'm not holding back. His wings erupted with hundreds of feathers shooting outward in every direction like a storm of blades. Instead of striking vital points, they pierced into legs and joints, crippling the movement of the infected. Dozens of civilians collapsed instantly as their legs were shredded. The charging mass slowed. Endeavor spoke again through the comm, they keep coming. We need to regroup and organize. Night-Eye responded quickly. All units head to the east side of the forest. Circle around and regroup there. He paused briefly. And be careful of the forest itself. We still don't know if Junsei is planning something there. Heroes and police began retreating in coordinated movements, fighting and falling back at the same time. Teams covered one another as they pushed through waves of infected civilians. Eventually the scattered groups converged at the eastern side of the forest where hundreds of heroes and police had already gathered to form a defensive line. Endeavor reached the position and immediately moved toward Night-Eye. How bad is it? Night-Eye's face was grim. He adjusted his glasses before continuing. We've already lost dozens of people, and we still don't know how many civilians have been infected or the scale of the attack. But according to police headquarters, the attack is currently focused here. There are no reports elsewhere about this. His eyes moved toward the chaotic battlefield. The worst part is that they're not acting mindlessly. They coordinate attacks, do surprise attacks, and exploit openings. His hands tightened into fists. I suspect Junsei is somewhere nearby, watching us. Controlling them. Hawks landed beside them. I flew across half the area earlier, he said. Didn't see him anywhere. Night-Eye shook his head. He's not a fool. He might be hiding among the civilians. He paused. He might be seeing through them. Night-Eye clenched his hands harder. I didn't expect him to be capable of something this twisted, he said quietly. As if controlling nature wasn't already bad enough. Endeavor cut him off. This isn't the time for speculation. We need a plan. Night-Eye exhaled slowly. He shook his head. The only plan I can think of is finding Junsei. But what I fear now is that he will turn his eyes to infect the rest of the city. Then his eyes suddenly shifted. The press. Several reporters had remained nearby earlier, protected by heroes and police as the chaos erupted. They were now hiding behind vehicles while continuing to record the unfolding disaster. Night-Eye immediately rushed toward them. Is this live? He asked. One of the reporters nodded nervously. He stepped in front of the camera while saying, "Focus on me." The cameraman obeyed instantly. Night-Eye faced the lens and spoke clearly. The villain, Junsei, is attacking us right now. His voice was calm but firm. We do not yet know his full objective or the exact mechanism of his power, but he is somehow turning civilians into puppets and forcing them to attack others. Hundreds of people have already been affected, and the number is increasing. The reporters behind the camera paled. If you are bitten by one of the controlled individuals, Night-Eye continued, you may also become infected. This appears to spread like a disease through bites. His expression hardened. This is extremely serious. If you see someone with glowing veins or a blue flower in their eye, Call your families and friends, warn them. Do not approach the infected. Night Eye took a slow breath. We are doing everything we can to locate the villain and stop this attack. Until then, please take every precaution possible. Stay safe. He stepped away from the camera and returned to Endeavor. We cannot remain here, he said quietly. We have to find Junsei. Hawks stared at him in disbelief. Do you realize what you just did? You just spread panic across the entire country. Again, we don't know the scale of this attack, Night Eye replied calmly. Panic and awareness are better than ignorance at this time. He looked toward the infected civilians. And I fear those people are already dead, even if we stop Junsei now. Hawks fell silent. After a moment he asked, can't you use your quirk to locate him? Night Eye shook his head. Not necessarily. He looked uneasy. And if I look too deeply into the future, it could be dangerous. Endeavor said firmly, I've heard what your quirk can do. Look into my future. Night Eye hesitated. As long as you need, Endeavor continued. Find that damn bastard. For a moment Night Eye stood still. Then he activated his quirk. His eyes locked onto Endeavor. Night Eye's face changed. Endeavor noticed at once. What did you see? Night Eye lowered his head slowly. Junsei is nearby. Endeavor's eyes narrowed. Night Eye lifted his gaze toward the distant mass of civilians still fighting the heroes. His voice came out heavy. Behind them. He paused for a moment. He will kill you. And everyone else here. The words were like a death sentence. Endeavor and Hawks both stared at him. Everyone here would die. That was not something any of them were prepared to hear. Then Endeavor's eyes burned with defiance. We'll see about that, he said. His flames burned stronger around his shoulders and head. And even if I go down, I'm taking that bastard with me. Sir Night Eye said nothing. His expression remained tense. Beside them, Hawks scratched the back of his head and let out a dry sigh. I definitely didn't sign up for this when I woke up this morning, he muttered. He glanced between the two. So what exactly did we do in that future to end up dying? His tone remained casual, but there was a hint of seriousness behind it. Because I'd very much like to avoid that. Night Eye answered, you attacked him. Both raised their eyebrows when Junsei stepped out from among the civilians. Night Eye continued, Endeavor charged immediately while you were a little slower right behind him. Junsei grew a tail and pierced Endeavor with it, then you died in an explosion. After that he slaughtered the rest of us. Hawks exchanged a quick glance with Endeavor. That's easy to fix, Hawks said. We just don't rush in or attack first. He shrugged lightly. Let him make the first move, and then we gang up on him with the others while watching out for the tail. Endeavor nodded. Junsei, hidden among the infected crowd, had heard every word. He narrowed his glowing eyes, then he issued a command. Instantly the infected civilians stopped attacking. The sudden shift was immediate and disturbing. The horde that had been clawing and biting moments earlier suddenly froze in place. Then they began stepping aside, opening a path. The heroes reacted at once. He's coming, someone muttered. The infected parted like a living corridor as a single figure walked forward from the crowd. A gray hoodie covered his head, casting a shadow over his face. But the two glowing blue eyes beneath it were unmistakable. The moment he appeared, the top heroes moved forward instinctively. Endeavor stepped to the front alongside Hawks, Best Jeanist, Ed Shot, Mirko and several others. Endeavor took the lead speaking. His voice carried anger. You've crossed every line imaginable. Not even innocent civilians were spared from your madness. You've killed countless people, and now you're turning civilians into weapons. Flames flickered around him. Your crimes will not go unpunished. Junsei's glowing eyes briefly shifted toward the nearby press cameras that were still broadcasting the confrontation live across the country. Then he looked back at the heroes. I am here to punish you all. The statement made several heroes frown. Night Eye stepped next to Endeavor and spoke. Is this because we plan to burn the forest? Junsei answered calmly. Your decision to attack it only hastened your turn. Before Night Eye could respond, Mirko stepped forward impatiently. Why are we even talking to him? She snapped. He's the reason for all of this. She pointed directly at Junsei. This time I'm definitely beating you. Night Eye raised his hand. I want to understand something first. He looked directly at Junsei. Why are you doing all of this? Why did you involve innocent civilians in this? Junsei's answer came without hesitation. Your greed led you to consume and steal from us. His voice remained calm. We are reclaiming what belongs to us. Night Eye narrowed his eyes. Junsei spoke a single word. The sound of wings suddenly filled the air. And then came the buzzing. The heroes turned instinctively toward the forest behind them. The sky was turning black. Thousands of birds burst from the trees, filling the air in a massive swirling cloud. Beneath them, hundreds of thousands of insects rose like a living storm. They spread outward rapidly, encircling the entire battlefield. Several heroes and police officers paled as the swarm darkened the sky. Night Eye stared at Junsei. So you've come here to fight on behalf of nature? Hawks snorted. The guy's completely insane. Endeavor's jaw tightened. We should have thrown him in prison during the sports festival, he growled. He was clearly dangerous even back then. Night Eye ignored the comments. He took another step forward. Stop this madness, he said firmly. Release the civilians. Junsei tilted his head slightly. What else would you call it? Night Eye shot back. You speak as if you're not human yourself. His voice hardened. Do you forget that you also eat fruit from trees? Meat from animals? Humans depend on nature. Not every living thing depends on other living things to continue living, this is nature. Junsei narrowed his eyes. Chapter 101, The Fall of Heroes 2572 words. Junsei stood before the assembled heroes, the infected civilians forming a silent wall around him while the dark swarm of birds and insects churned above. Life rose first when the world came to be, Junsei said quietly. When silence was the only sound. His voice carried across to all heroes. You were not born of life. You are not part of us. You are an invasive existence that shouldn't have existed. The glowing blue eyes beneath the hood intensified. We evolved this world. We endured, adapted, found balance, and moved forward. Your kind began with theft. Stealing from us. Then from beneath the shadow of the hood, another pair of glowing eyes opened. Junsei's gaze now held for lights as he continued speaking. One day that thing came along and stole the fruit. His voice became colder. The first humans were born from it, or rather, it evolved into your kind. The heroes exchanged confused looks. Junsei kept speaking. You call me a monster. You call my actions evil. The four eyes watched them without blinking. And yet your kind kept returning again and again to devour me. Never satisfied. The heroes listening felt a deep unease creeping into their minds. I watched you grow from fragile things into what you are now, changing through thousands of my lives. Hawk scoffed. Yup, he's gone completely insane. Junsei ignored him. I watched your evolution, he continued. Your strength, your shape, your quirks, all born from my flesh and blood. His voice darkened. And yet you were never satisfied. You kept stealing from life. Tearing it apart. Acting as though you were entitled to everything. You build your identity and faith on a false entitlement. Then another change occurred. 2 more glowing eyes opened beneath the hood. Now he had 6 eyes. Junsei's voice changed as well, becoming deeper and alien. Now you call this madness? A long silence followed. I call it balance. The 6 eyes are fixed directly on Sir Night Eye. And justice your kind learned too late. Night Eye felt his entire body turn cold. Endeavor spoke angrily, enough of this. He's completely lost his mind. Once we defeat him, this madness ends. Flames erupted around his body. Junsei shifted his head slightly toward him. I am sane, human. I was alive before this world had a name. Before your gods gave meaning to the thing that birthed you. Before the first stolen fruit split flesh into man and woman. I am the beginning of life. The 6 eyes burned with absolute certainty. And your kind has survived this long only because I did not see you for what you are. Now I know. And nothing you do can stop me from taking back what was stolen. Junsei lifted his hands, and they began to change immediately. His fingers elongated, stretching outward until they resembled glowing razor-sharp claws. At the same time the gem hidden beneath his clothes began glowing brightly through the fabric. Then a tail emerged from behind him. He was transforming like when he killed All for One. But before the heroes could react, thousands of birds and hundreds of thousands of insects dove toward him at once from above. They swarmed his body completely. Night Eye stared at the sight. His face drained of color, his will to fight collapsing. Endeavor noticed immediately. What's wrong with you? He demanded. What do you see? His voice grew impatient. Can we attack now? Night Eye's voice came out weak. He's a demon. His eyes remained fixed on the swirling mass of creatures. We can't stop that thing. Endeavor gritted his teeth. Then he attacked anyway. Prominence burn. A massive torrent of fire erupted forward, blasting directly into the swarm surrounding Junsei. Dozens of glowing golden birds launched themselves forward. A radiant golden barrier formed instantly in front of the swarm. Endeavor's flames slammed against it and stopped. Endeavor's eyes widened. What the hell is this? What did he do? Junsei's voice echoed from within the storm of creatures. Your kind devoured my blood and flesh to gain quirks. And you used them to further tear life apart. The humans finally began to notice the insects and birds were changing. Some insects grew larger. Some birds expanded in size while others changed color entirely. Strange lights pulsed beneath their feathers and shells. Junsei's voice continued. I am giving quirks to all living things. The words carried like a death sentence. This is a war. And we hunger for your end. The swarm around Junsei thinned enough to show Junsei standing there shirtless while the birds were pecking at his skin, and the insects bit into his flesh. Everyone watching realized what was happening. Junsei was feeding them his blood and flesh literally. The creatures were devouring him. Some humans felt nauseous at the sight. Others simply felt fear. Junsei stood there calmly as his 6 glowing eyes looked across the battlefield like a predator surveying prey. I will not stop until your kind is gone. His voice was filled with absolute hatred. No matter how many lives I must take. I will never forget or forgive. The infected crowd surrounding Junsei moved at once. Hundreds of bodies lunged toward the heroes at the same time. Endeavor reacted instantly. Best Genist, Hawks, he barked. Don't let them get close. Restrain them. His eyes shifted toward Junsei's position. The rest of us will take down that lunatic. Best Genist and Hawks moved immediately. Threads spread across the battlefield like nets while Hawks unleashed a barrage of feathers. Legs were pierced, bodies were thrown backward, and dozens of infected civilians were restrained. The 2 heroes focused entirely on containment. Behind them, the other top heroes who were about to advance toward Junsei paused. I can't see him, Edgeshot asked sharply. Endeavor scanned the battlefield. He's hiding among the crowd. His eyes briefly flicked toward Night Eye, who still stood frozen. Endeavor's patience snapped. Damn it, Night Eye, focus. Night Eye looked up slowly. Every time I look into the future it changes, he said quietly. His voice carried dread. But the ending is always the same. Endeavor clicked his tongue in frustration. He turned his attention back to the battlefield. Civilians were still charging, and Junsei was nowhere to be seen. For a brief moment a thought crossed his mind. What if these people were really dead? He didn't get time to answer that question. A sudden cry of pain erupted nearby. Endeavor snapped his head to the side, and his eyes widened. Best Jeanist stood frozen with a hole punched straight through his chest. Blood floated in the air in front of him. For a brief second Endeavor didn't understand what he was seeing. Then he understood that it was Junsei's invisible clone. At the same moment the other heroes reached the same conclusion. Mirko and Edgeshot moved instantly. Both attacked the empty air where the floating blood had appeared. The invisible figure dodged and tried to keep distance from the heroes. Endeavor clenched his teeth. The battlefield was too crowded. He couldn't fight without burning civilians or heroes. This was the worst possible situation to be in. Before he could react further, screams erupted behind him. Endeavor turned around. Several heroes in the rear line were suddenly being torn apart by another invisible attacker. Kamui Woods and Crust rushed in immediately to intercept the unseen threat. Hawk's voice rang out across the chaos. We can't hold back anymore. He'll kill us all. Hawks unleashed his feathers again. But this time there was no restraint. The blade sliced through civilians mercilessly. Bodies collapsed. Blood sprayed across the street. If those people had still been alive moments ago, Hawks had just started slaughtering them. Endeavor watched the scene with burning fury. Damn it, Junsei. Flames exploded around his body. You will pay for this. Prominence burn. A torrent of fire surged forward. The flames tore through the infected crowd, burning bodies instantly to ash. A bloody corridor opened through the mass of civilians. And at the end of that burning path stood Junsei. Exactly where he had been before. Hawks said. The invisible ones are really his clones. We need to take down the main body. At that exact moment the birds and insects surrounding the battlefield suddenly took flight. But instead of attacking the heroes, they flew away. Endeavor asked, You damn bastard, what are you planning? His voice thundered. Where are they going? Junsei answered, They will attack the rest of the city. While I kill you all. Hawks cursed under his breath. You bastard. Junsei didn't respond. Instead he opened his mouth and roared. A sonic shockwave blasted outward, shattering pavement and tearing apart the street as it raced toward the heroes. Hawks took flight into the air to avoid the attack, while Endeavor propelled himself upward with flames. Junsei moved at the same instant. But instead of pursuing the flying heroes, he went straight for the heroes behind them. In a blur he appeared in front of Gang Orca. The hero barely had time to react before Junsei shot out a blood bullet from close range. It pierced straight through Gang Orca's neck, causing the hero to collapse instantly. Junsei didn't even pause, he continued moving toward his next target, Ryukyu, who was already transformed into her massive dragon form. She tried to intercept him, but Junsei crashed directly into her, his clawed hand punched straight through her dragon scales. Then he injected his blood directly into her body before moving on. Junsei didn't even look back. Hawks looked in horror. Damn it, he's fast. Endeavor was already chasing him through the air. But both heroes froze when they saw what happened next. Gang Orca slowly rose from the ground, his veins began glowing blue. Followed by Ryukyu's massive dragon body rising. The two heroes had a blue flower bloom out of their eyes. Everyone watching understood what Junsei was trying to do. He was choosing targets, heroes who couldn't defend themselves against his speed and infect them. Junsei was turning their strongest fighters into his army, while the invisible clones were keeping the heroes distracted. Chaos spread uncontrolled. Junsei and the invisible clones had shattered the heroes' formation completely, turning the battle into desperate survival. The infected civilians kept coming from every direction. As time went by, more people fell. Fear began spreading among the police and heroes alike as the situation spiraled further out of control. Some were dragged down by the infected and torn apart. Others collapsed after being pierced by Junsei's blood attacks, only to rise moments later as puppets with flowers blooming from their eyes. The battlefield was collapsing. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. Endeavor stood at the center of the chaos, flames burning wildly around him as rage boiled inside his chest. His eyes searched desperately for Junsei, but he continued moving through the battlefield like a ghost, ignoring him entirely while targeting other heroes. It was maddening. Junsei's speed combined with the crowded battlefield made it nearly impossible for Endeavor to fight properly. Every time he tried to unleash his full power, civilians or allies stood in the way. For the first time, Endeavor felt his quirk was completely useless. Then suddenly Junsei stopped moving around. He turned and looked directly at Endeavor. His right arm gripped his left arm just below the shoulder, then with a swift motion, he ripped it off and threw it like a spear toward Endeavor. Endeavor's eyes widened in surprise, but his reaction came instantly. His fist ignited with flame as he swung forward, smashing the arm away before it could strike him. The burning limb crashed into the pavement beside him. "Stop running and face me, you bastard!" Endeavor roared. Junsei did not respond. Instead, his gaze drifted to the side. There, a group of heroes were desperately fighting off the infected civilians. Leading them was a woman whose head burned with green flames, as she held the line against the advancing swarm. Junsei opened his mouth and unleashed another sonic roar. The invisible shockwave slammed into the group without warning. Their bodies were thrown violently across the pavement, several collapsing instantly as the infected civilians surged over them. Endeavor watched his own sidekicks get swallowed by the horde. His rage exploded. "You bastard!" He lunged forward. But Hawk's voice cut through the battlefield. "Endeavor! To your left!" Endeavor turned immediately. Another Junsei was forming beside him, completely naked, his body still growing from the severed arm. The clone lunged straight toward him. Endeavor reacted instantly. Prominence burn. A massive torrent of fire erupted from his body, engulfing the clone entirely and turning it into ashes. But that was all the distraction Junsei needed. While Endeavor focused on the clone, the real Junsei slipped in from the other side. He moved like lightning. Before Endeavor could react, a blood bullet shot out. It pierced directly into Endeavor's side. Endeavor groaned as the impact struck him. Pain spread through his body, but he forced himself to turn, his face twisted with fury as he swung his arm in retaliation. A blazing wave of fire erupted from his hand, forcing Junsei to leap away to avoid the flames. Hawks landed beside him moments later. "You okay?" Endeavor didn't answer immediately. He looked down. Blue veins were already spreading across his body. The infection was moving fast. "No," he finally said quietly. Hawk's expression stiffened. Endeavor looked back at him, his voice weaker now. "I can feel it." His breathing grew heavier. "The infected, they aren't alive." His eyes slowly began glowing blue. "His blood is deadly." Hawks froze. Endeavor's body trembled as the infection took hold. The blue veins spread up his neck, crawling toward his face. Endeavor muttered, "Do me a favor." His voice was barely audible now. "Don't let my body become his puppet." Hawk's fists clenched. He watched as Endeavor's eyes turned fully blue. Then the flower bloomed from his right eye. For a single moment, Hawks didn't move. Then his feathers shot forward. A sharp burst of blades shattered Endeavor's skull instantly. The hero's body collapsed to the ground. Hawks stared at the corpse. Then he looked up at Junsei. "You made us fight corpses the whole time." Junsei answered calmly. Hawk's eyes hardened. His wings spread wide as he launched himself into the air. But he didn't get far. A figure suddenly leapt onto his back. Teeth sank into his neck. Hawk screamed as he lost control of his flight and crashed violently into the pavement below. When he looked up, he saw the attacker clearly. A blue flower bloomed from her eye as she clawed at him like a feral animal. Junsei barely looked at them. Instead, his gaze shifted toward the fallen body of Endeavor. The corpse lay headless on the blood-soaked pavement. Junsei walked toward it slowly. As he approached, the horn on his forehead began growing larger, stretching upward as golden light started radiating from it. The glow spread, bathing the corpse in the light. Then something impossible happened. Flesh began reforming. Bone regrew. Within seconds, Endeavor's head had completely regenerated. The hero rose slowly to his feet. The blue flower in his eye glowing brightly. Junsei planned to use everything he could to bring about the end of humanity. This is war. Chapter 102, The Day Nature Declared War. 1939 words Japan watched in horror. Across every television, every phone screen, every emergency broadcast channel, the same broadcast played. What the public witnessed could no longer be called a battle between heroes and villains. This was a horror show, a true nightmare. The infamous villain Junsei had appeared once more, and this time, he had done something no one had imagined possible. Civilians were being turned into mindless puppets akin to zombies, forced to attack the very heroes and policemen sworn to protect them. They saw their heroes fall. One after another. Some were killed outright. Others collapsed after being struck by Junsei's blood attacks, only to rise moments later with blue veins spreading through their bodies and flowers blooming from their eyes. The press crews had continued filming despite the chaos, their cameras capturing everything until the darkest moment that shattered what little hope remained. Endeavor, who had lost his head and died, rose from the ground with his head made anew. He stood with a glowing flower in his eye, terror spread across the entire country. If even the number one hero could be turned into one of Junsei's puppets after death, then what chance did anyone else have? Panic began spreading across Japan like wildfire. And only minutes later, things became even worse. The mutated birds and insects that had fled the battlefield began attacking the surrounding city blocks. Entire streets descended into chaos as the creatures descended upon the population with the clear intention of killing humans. Some insects crackled with electricity, releasing bursts of lightning. Birds with golden feathers erected glowing barriers in the air while others ignited stones with flames before dropping them like burning bullets onto crowds below. It was unlike anything Japan had ever witnessed. People ran. Many chose to hide inside their homes, barricading doors and windows in desperation. But that quickly proved to be a terrible mistake. The creatures were not attacking randomly, they were sweeping through the districts methodically, clearing entire neighborhoods of human life. If they couldn't make it to the human, they would burn down the entire place. Those who stayed behind were hunted down. Those who ran simply kept running, fleeing as far as possible from the madness spreading through the city. The same sight was repeating across all cities. Across the country, the entire animal kingdom had begun rising against humanity. Pets suddenly turned on their owners. Dogs and cats attacked the families who had raised them. Pet stores and animal shelters descended into violence as the animals inside tore into workers and customers alike. Even the forests were emptying. Creatures that normally avoided human contact walked out from the depths of the wilderness, moving toward cities and towns with a single purpose: to kill humans. The seas were no safer. Along the coasts and in nearby waters, massive disturbances erupted across shipping lanes. Witnesses watched in disbelief as whales surfaced beside vessels before slamming their massive bodies against the hulls. Ships capsized. Others sank outright. Those who fell into the ocean quickly discovered that the water itself had become hostile. Schools of fish, sharks, and other sea creatures swarmed the survivors, tearing them apart before rescue could arrive. Some people tried to flee the country. But the horror only deepened when new reports began arriving. Similar attacks were occurring across the world. Cities in other nations reported the same phenomenon. Animals attacking humans in coordinated waves, insects swarming entire districts, sea creatures assaulting ships. There was no escape. The truth slowly dawned on humanity. Whatever Junsei had done, it was not limited to Japan. The entire planet had been affected. The animal kingdom had risen in unity. And their target was humanity's extinction. Inside UA High School, Principal Nizu stared at the countless reports flooding across his monitors. News feeds from every major city in Japan, emergency communications from government agencies, and international alerts from other countries filled the screens before him. Nizu felt genuine terror. Not once had he imagined Junsei would escalate the situation to this scale. Junsei's final words before unleashing the attack echoed through his mind again. The ancient entity they had suspected existed and the possibility they had feared. It was Junsei. Nizu leaned back slowly, his mind racing. He had once wondered if Junsei had lived multiple lives between his earliest known existence as the rat Ao and his current human life. But now he knew he was wrong. Nizu closed his eyes and searched through his oldest memories. Back when he had been a lab rat. Even then, Ao had understood the experiments happening around him and humans with perfect clarity. Ao had reacted quickly to changing circumstances, almost as if he had done this before. Because he had. Ao had not been Junsei's first life. Nizu slowly placed a paw against his head. Life is a giant colony. He murmured quietly. And Junsei is its heart. Or its brain. His will spread through every living thing. The office door suddenly burst open. President Mike rushed inside, breathing heavily. The barrier activated. The dome is working. Nizu looked up immediately. The mutated creatures can't enter the campus. Relief flickered briefly across Nizu's face before fading. What about the evacuation? He asked. Nearby civilians. The students' families. President Mike hesitated before answering. All nearby civilians are within UA, and we made progress with the families, he said carefully. I'm afraid some might have already fallen. His voice lowered. Some families live in areas that were hit early. We couldn't reach them. Nizu closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his voice had become firm. Make sure the students do not leave the school under any circumstances. No matter what they hear. No matter what they think is happening. He paused. It would be suicide. President Mike nodded grimly. Understood. He turned toward the door but stopped halfway. Is there any way to stop him? Nizu remained silent for several seconds before answering. I've sent emergency messages to every hero association and government authority across the world. He looked back at the screens filled with catastrophe. Junsei's attack is already affecting other countries. The scale will only grow with every passing moment. President Mike nodded slowly before leaving the office. When the door closed again, Nizu finally allowed himself to exhale. His mind drifted back to the one vision that haunted Sir Night Eye. The demon floating above a destroyed world. If that future was still approaching, then Junsei had not yet reached that point. There was still hope to stop him. Nizu looked out the window toward the distant horizon. How to make him stop this madness? He murmured quietly. Class 1A sat in silence and grief. They had watched it live. Their mentors, the heroes who had trained them, were slaughtered one after another by Junsei. Some died fighting. Others rose again moments later as puppets. Fear and grief had settled deep in their hearts. Among them, Shoto Todoroki sat motionless, his head pressed tightly against his forehead. No one dared speak to him. Everyone had seen what happened. He had watched his father die. And then rise again as a mindless puppet. The classroom door suddenly opened. Mineta stepped inside. His eyes were red and swollen. He walked slowly into the room, his steps unsteady as if he were barely holding himself together. "The area where I live," he muttered. His voice trembled. It was one of the first places attacked. No one moved. "All communication is gone," Mineta continued quietly. "There's no news about survivors." He looked down at the floor. "My parents were there." Then his legs gave out. Mineta dropped to his knees and began crying. The sound echoed painfully through the silent classroom. None of the students could speak. They all understood the feeling. The teachers had already explained the situation earlier. The school was under lockdown while civilians were being evacuated to UA as a safe zone. The barrier dome had been activated, and they had been ordered not to leave the campus under any circumstances. Their families had been contacted. Those who could reach the school were already on the way. For everyone else, all they could do was wait, hoping for the best. The teachers were currently preparing the school's defenses, organizing evacuation routes, and assigning emergency roles in case the campus itself came under attack. Class 1A had been told to stay alert. Their help might be needed. Mineta's crying continued, his shoulders shaking violently. "I want to kill that bastard," he choked out. "I want to rip him to pieces." The other students lowered their heads. None of them disagreed. After a moment, Denki Kaminari walked forward and knelt beside him. "I'm sorry, buddy," Kaminari said quietly. He placed a hand on Mineta's shoulder. "If we get the chance, we'll definitely take down that monster." The words hung in the room like a promise. Several students nodded silently. Time passed slowly before Todoroki suddenly spoke. "Yayorozu." Everyone looked toward him. Todoroki's eyes had shifted toward Momo, specifically toward the small bird sitting quietly on her shoulder. "That bastard can see and hear through animals," Todoroki said. The room grew still. "What stops him from using that bird to watch us?" Momo blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard by the sudden accusation. Only then did the rest of the class notice the bird. One by one, heads turned. The tiny creature perched calmly on her shoulder, completely silent. Mineta suddenly jumped to his feet. "Give me that bird," he shouted. "I want to rip it apart." Momo immediately pulled the bird protectively into her arms. "Dola has nothing to do with this," she protested. "And he doesn't have a reason to spy on us, but if you're worried about that, I can release her outside." Mineta's eyes burned with anger. "I don't care." His voice trembled with rage. "He feels the pain of insects and animals, right?" He pointed at the bird in her hands. "Then I want him to feel the pain of that bird." Momo held the small creature tighter against her chest. Kaminari grabbed Mineta from behind. "Buddy, calm down. Calm down." Mineta shouted through tears. "They killed my family." The room fell silent again. "If killing the bird hurts that monster," Ciro muttered. "I'm not against it." Mina immediately spoke with a shake from her head. "You can't hurt a tiny innocent bird just because some lunatic out there is murdering people." Ida spoke next with a serious expression. "Todoroki's concern is valid," he said. "If Junsei can control animals, then the bird could indeed be spying on us. We don't know what information could prove to be useful to him." Momo looked down at Dola nervously. "I'll let her fly away through the window," she said. "That should solve the problem." Mineta shook his head violently. His voice was filled with rage. "We should kill it. And every single bird and insect in this place." Several students felt uncomfortable with his words, but said nothing. They understood why he was speaking like that. Then Midoriya spoke up. I'm against hurting it. We should let it go, Midoriya said. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the bird. But first I want to know something. Why hasn't it attacked us? The question made everyone pause. Midoriya continued slowly. Animals everywhere are attacking humans right now. So why isn't this bird? Every student turned their gaze toward the tiny bird resting quietly in Momo's arms. Still docile. Why was this one different? Chapter 103, The Joke That Became Reality. 1828 words. The classroom became thoughtful after Midoriya's question. The small bird still rested calmly in Momo's hands, completely unaffected by the tension filling the room. Kaminari scratched his head uneasily. That's actually a good question. Maybe Todoroki is right. He is watching us right now. Ida adjusted his glasses, thinking carefully. Or perhaps something else entirely is happening here. Then everyone slowly turned to the same person. He didn't need anyone to say a word. The moment he saw their faces, he already understood what they wanted. Quietly, he stood from his seat and walked toward Momo. She hesitated but didn't stop him as he leaned closer to the bird perched in her hands. Why are you not attacking us? Koda asked gently. Didn't Junsei, I mean the World Soul, order you to? The bird chirped several times. Koda listened carefully, and his eyes widened in surprise. What did she say? Kaminari asked immediately. Koda turned back to the class. She said Junsei told them it is time to unite and end the enemies of life. But she won't hurt Momo because Momo has always been kind to her and feeds her. And if she attacked Momo's friends, it would make Momo sad. Mina blinked in surprise. That's actually really nice of her. She's loyal, that's unexpected, Shuji added. Midoriya raced. If Junsei can control animals, then how is she resisting him? Is it distance or something else? Koda repeated the question to the bird. More chirps followed. Koda listened and then looked back at the others. She says there is nothing to resist. Junsei can't control her or anything else. He only tells them what the right thing to do is and asks them to help. It's up to them whether they agree or not. Ida's eyes widened. He can't control them. But he still can see and hear through them. And why are they all attacking humans if that's true? Someone asked them and they just agreed. Koda relayed the question again. The bird answered. Koda took a moment before translating. She says humans are bad creatures that stole from the soul for too long. Animals couldn't fight humans before because humans were too strong and had torn life apart and stored it inside themselves. They were afraid of humans. The classroom remained still as he continued. The soul told them they could win if they unite, that humans should be the ones to be afraid. There are far more of them than humans. If they work together, they can get their peace back and restore life. He promised that he will put the humans in the same pain they put them through. He will tear them apart and take from them just as they did to them. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Jiro broke the silence. Holy shit, she whispered. Nature hates us, and Junsei united them under a common goal. Bakugo frowned deeply. That still doesn't make sense. He pointed toward the bird. Reports say even pets are attacking their owners. But that bird isn't attacking anyone. What's the difference? Suyu spoke slowly. People don't really understand how animals feel, Ribbit. What if pets resent humans for trapping them? Or castrating them? They might hate it but can't do anything because their survival depends on humans. Midoriya straightened. So Junsei isn't forcing animals to fight or controlling them in any way, he said. He gave them a cause and motivation. Uraraka stared in disbelief. This is insane. Animals have a cause to unite now. How to even stop something like that? Todoroki answered quietly. We probably can't. And even if Junsei is defeated, he might become a martyr for them. He already proved they can hurt humans. Why stop now? Tokoyami folded his arms thoughtfully. Calling him the world soul makes sense now. He's like the arbiter of the animal kingdom, giving them guidance and leaving it to them to carry out the will of the whole. Kaminari suddenly looked toward Koda and said, ask her something else. Koda asked. How long has Junsei lived? The room looked at Kaminari. Kaminari raised his hands slightly when everyone stared at him. His speech sounded crazy, but what if it's true? The bird called him the beginning, when we questioned her last time. Ida shook his head immediately. That's absurd. There is no way someone or something existed for that long. Junsei is delusional and crazy. Still, Koda turned back to the bird and asked the question. Dola chirped softly in response. Koda listened, then slowly looked back at the class. She says, he is the beginning of life. The one who started it. Even hearing it again, none of them could believe it. The answer is just too hard to accept. Midoriya finally spoke. I don't think we should release the bird or hurt it. He looked at Dola carefully. She isn't hostile. And she might answer more questions we could have later, even if the answers are vague. Several students nodded, though some still looked uneasy. Momo remained silent for a moment, staring down at the bird resting in her hands. Then she lifted her head. There is something I need to tell you, she said slowly. It's about Junsei. And the principal. The class immediately focused on her. It's hard to believe, Momo continued. I doubted it myself. She took a slow breath. But after everything that has happened, I'm starting to think it might actually be true. After Momo told them what she knew, complete silence and dread filled the class. Junsei moved across the city like a calamity given form. Wherever animals struggled against humans, he appeared. When birds were driven away by gunfire, or when desperate survivors tried to burn away swarms of insects, Junsei arrived at impossible speed to tip the balance. His claws tore through flesh, his blood bullets pierced skulls, and those who survived his attacks often rose moments later as infected puppets to continue the slaughter. He attacked everyone he saw. There was no hesitation anymore, just his hatred and determination. Humans were the enemy. If animals faltered anywhere in the city, Junsei sensed it instantly and rushed to their aid, cutting down the defenders and allowing the creatures to continue the purge. The great extinction of humans was progressing well. Entire districts had already fallen silent. Without realizing it, Junsei passed through a familiar street and approached a large iron gate. His feet moved automatically, carrying him along the road as he continued his search for surviving humans. The sign beside the gate read Aichi Elite's private school. The school he had attended with Momo just 1 year ago. Junsei did not react at first. He simply continued walking past it, his attention already shifting toward distant cries and the sounds of battle deeper within the city. Then his body stopped. As if something had pulled on an invisible thread within him. Junsei slowly turned his head back toward the gate. There, lying on the ground just inside the entrance, was a body. His old PE teacher. Yujiro Kuma. The man still clutched a wooden baseball bat tightly in his hands, even in death. The bat was cracked and stained dark, evidence of a desperate last stand. Around the body, dozens of dead insects and a few broken bird feathers littered the ground. It looked like he had tried to fend them off. Tried to protect the school and failed. Not far from him, another body lay collapsed against the ground. The school headmaster. The elderly man had wrapped his arms around a female student, shielding her completely with his own body. Even now, in death, his grip remained tight, as if he had refused to let go until the very end. The girl was motionless beneath him. Both of them had died together. Junsei's gaze drifted past them and into the school grounds. The campus had become a graveyard. Bodies of students and teachers were scattered across the yard and hallways, some of them still recognizable. Juniors he had once passed in the corridors. Teachers whose classes he had sat through. Familiar faces. For the first time since the war began, Junsei felt something shift within him. The burning fury that had driven him forward suddenly cooled, replaced by a strange hollow feeling in his chest. He stood there silently for several seconds. Then he shook his head. His 6 glowing eyes ignited again with renewed resolve. Humans were the enemy. Every single one of them. Junsei turned away from the school and continued moving through the city. The cleansing was not finished, and hesitation would only slow the inevitable. More humans remained. They all had to die. As he traveled across the ruined streets, Junsei soon encountered another disturbance. A group of birds had gathered outside a small bakery, repeatedly slamming against the windows and doors. Humans were hiding inside. Junsei narrowed his eyes. Without a second thought, he rushed forward and raised his hand toward the building. An explosion erupted instantly. The blast tore through the bakery walls, shattering the windows and ripping apart the barricades that had been hastily built behind the door. The entire front of the building collapsed inward, dust and debris filling the air. Junsei stepped calmly through the wreckage. His eyes scanned the interior, searching for survivors. Then he stopped. The humans hiding inside had been killed by the explosion almost instantly. Their bodies lay scattered among the broken shelves. One of them caught his attention. His former classmate and Momo's friend. But his gaze quickly moved past him. Toward the back of the bakery. One person was still alive. She lay on the floor surrounded by shattered glass and broken shelves. Her body was soaked in blood, and a large shard of glass had cut deeply into her neck. Blood pooled beneath her as she struggled weakly to breathe. Her eyes slowly lifted. They met Junsei's. Tears formed immediately. She whispered weakly. Her voice trembled. "I was just joking." Her words faded into silence. The light slowly disappeared from her eyes. Komi died. Junsei remained standing where he was, staring at her body. For several seconds he did not move. Behind him, the birds that had been trying to break into the bakery gathered on the shattered doorway. They chirped softly, their calls filled with concern as they looked toward him. Junsei glanced back at them. Through the connection that existed between him and every living creature, he sent a simple command. Continue. The birds took flight immediately, leaving the bakery to resume their attack on the remaining humans in the city. Junsei looked down at Komi one last time. His fist tightened slowly. Then he shook his head and relaxed his hand. He did not care about humans. They were all the enemies of life. It is either them or life. That's all. Chapter 104, The Humans He Cannot Kill. 1848 words. Junsei continued moving through the ruined streets of the city, his presence felt wherever animals fought humans. When resistance appeared, he intervened. Humans were cut down, infected, or scattered, and the creatures of the wild resumed their relentless advance. The cleansing continued. As Junsei crossed another block, a helicopter caught his attention. It was flying westward above the city, clearly trying to escape the chaos below. Junsei slowed his steps slightly and watched as a flock of birds surged upward toward the aircraft. At first he did nothing. The birds struck the helicopter repeatedly, slamming against the windows and rotor while others began generating a shimmering golden barrier in front of the cockpit. The helicopter lost control almost immediately. Its nose dipped and the machine began spiraling toward the ground. Junsei watched it fall. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of the passengers inside. Without thinking, he moved. Junsei shot forward like a lightning bolt, his body crossing the distance in an instant while his mind reached out to the birds attacking the aircraft. The flock obeyed immediately, breaking away. Junsei reached the falling helicopter moments before it struck the ground. With one swift movement he tore open the side door, grabbed the passengers inside, and leapt away just as the machine smashed into the street behind him in a violent explosion. The wreckage scattered across the pavement. Junsei landed several meters away, and lowered the 3 passengers gently onto the ground. He recognized them. Yayorozu. And one of the mansion guards who worked for their family. For a moment the 3 survivors were simply confused, trying to understand what had happened. Then they noticed the figure standing behind them. 6 glowing eyes stared down at them. Their faces turned pale instantly. Yayorozu's eyes filled with tears as her hands began trembling uncontrollably. The guard lowered his head immediately, surrendering without a word. Yayorozu reacted differently. At first there was fear. Then confusion. And finally a strange calm. "You saved us," he said slowly. "Do we not qualify for the extermination you started?" Junsei replied in a cold and inhuman voice, "You do." Yayorozu studied him carefully. "Then why did you save us?" Junsei paused for a moment. "I didn't think," he answered. "I just moved." Yayorozu nodded faintly. He took a slow breath. "I won't beg for my life at this point. But I have one last request." His eyes hardened slightly. "Please don't hurt Momo. Spare her from this madness." Beside him, Mrs. Yayorozu had been shaking uncontrollably, but hearing her daughter's name seemed to steady her slightly. She lowered her head deeply toward Junsei. "I beg you, spare my daughter." Junsei stared at them silently. Then his gaze shifted westward. That was where UA was located. The helicopter had clearly been heading there. "She is safe in UA," Junsei said. "I am keeping attacking that place to the end." The 3 humans looked up in surprise. "You can go there," Junsei continued. "Nothing will attack you on your way." Yayorozu remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "I wish I could understand what is happening inside your mind." Junsei looked at him without expression. "Even I don't understand why I am letting you humans go. I should kill you all." Yayorozu slowly stood up. "Sai once said you didn't have malice in you." His voice softened slightly. "He hoped you would remain like that." He shook his head faintly. "It's sad to see how things turned out." Junsei's 6 eyes narrowed. "This is long overdue," he said coldly. "I should have ended humanity thousands of lives ago." Yayorozu did not argue. Instead he looked at his frightened wife, and the guard still kneeling beside her. "Not everyone is as greedy or as bad as you believe," he said quietly. "You've seen that yourself." He gently helped his wife to her feet. "Let's go to UA." The guard rose as well, clearly stunned that they were still alive. The 3 began walking away toward the west. After a few steps, Mr. Yayorozu stopped and looked back. "Thank you for sparing us." His voice carried a trace of sadness. "I hope you change your mind before it's too late." Junsei answered without delay, "It is already too late. There is no stopping this now. End will come to all of you eventually." Yayorozu sighed softly and turned away. They continued walking toward the distant safety of UA. Junsei remained where he stood, watching them disappear into the ruined streets. He knew what he should do. He should kill them. He should go to UA and kill the refugees gathering there. Yet he could not bring himself to do it. And hearing Sai's name made him feel a little heavier. Junsei turned away, his fist clenching. He would not stop. A brief moment of peace between him and a few humans could not erase the countless lives of suffering that humanity had inflicted across his existence. It won't erase humans' actions toward life. This was bigger than himself. Junsei lifted his head toward the sky. UA would last a little longer. But only a little. When the cleansing of the world was finished, he would come for them as well. And then it would finally end. In a single week, Japan ceased to resemble a nation. Cities fell silent. Highways were filled with abandoned vehicles, their doors left open as people fled in panic. Entire districts were emptied of life except for the movement of animals and the occasional wandering puppet created by Junsei's blood. The numbers were beyond comprehension. Half the population was gone. Tens of millions had died in just 7 days. Those who survived either fled toward the only place still standing, UA, or attempted to escape the country entirely. Boats packed with desperate refugees left from coastal towns. Others gathered on small southern islands, hoping distance and the ocean would buy them time. Their desperation slowed Junsei because he refused to leave an area unfinished. His war was methodical. Each city, each district, each street was purged completely before he moved on. Humans were not allowed to remain behind him. After a week of extermination, Junsei finally reached Akita Prefecture. More precisely, the region where he had been born in this life. Near the Nagi no Shiro orphanage. The site was no different from the rest of Japan. Police barricades had failed, and the local heroes had long since fallen. Survivors had attempted to fortify certain buildings, but their efforts were temporary at best. It was only a matter of time before Junsei or the animals found them. This region would soon be silent as well. As Junsei walked through the ruined streets, a memory surfaced unexpectedly. She lived here. At an animal shelter. At first Junsei ignored the thought. Whatever fate that human had met was no longer his concern. Humans were the enemy now. But the idea lingered. After some time, he found himself turning toward the shelter. If she was dead, then that would be the end of it. If she was alive, he would allow her to leave for UA. She was not a bad human. Letting her live a little longer would not change anything. Eventually Junsei reached the shelter. Before even stepping inside, he felt the animals inside. Some dogs, cats and rabbits remained inside the building. They seemed to be moving freely but did not attempt to leave. Junsei reached out to them to understand what had happened. He quickly learned the answer. Kimi was still here. And the animals had protected her. When the waves of creatures began attacking humans, this small group had defended Kimi when other animals attempted to harm her. Even after the shelter was surrounded several times, these animals had asked the attackers to leave. They continued guarding her. Their reasoning was simple. Kimi had cared for them for years. She had saved many of them. To them, she was not an evil human. Junsei accepted the explanation without question. If he himself could allow certain humans to live, then the animals had the same right to choose who deserved protection. And Kimi was indeed a good human. Inside the shelter, Kimi had slowly gained confidence and a sense of safety because of them. The animals protected her, and she continued feeding and caring for them. They had formed their own fragile sanctuary. After thinking for a moment, Junsei stepped forward. The front door was not even barricaded. It seemed Kimi believed her protectors were enough. Junsei walked inside quietly. "Kimi," he called. His voice echoed faintly through the shelter halls. A moment later footsteps approached. Kimi appeared from the back rooms, confusion on her face as she searched for whoever had called her. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty, her hair disheveled, and her eyes were red from crying. Then she saw him. Her face turned completely pale. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Junsei stood still. "I am not here to harm you." Kimi stared at him in disbelief. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Why are you doing this? How could you do this?" Her eyes filled with pain. Junsei answered calmly. "Humans deserve it. They brought this upon themselves through their very nature. This is the fate they deserve." Kimi's breathing became uneven. "Then why are you here?" she asked weakly. "If not to kill me." Junsei looked at her quietly. "I came to see if you were alive. If you have survived, I plan to allow you to go to UA school. There is a refuge there. I am not attacking it for now. He paused. You are not a bad human. Kimmy bit her lip, anger and fear mixing in her expression. Years ago, she said slowly, when I first saw you in the orphanage, I wanted to help you. Her voice shook. I wanted to get close to you. Even back then I understood you saw the world differently from the rest of us. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And when I realized that, I told you something to answer your confusion about people. Junsei remained silent. Kimmy clenched her fists. I told you humans act out of fear and ignorance. Her voice grew louder. And now look at you. You're calling people you don't even know evil and trying to kill them. You are acting out of ignorance, just like the rest of people. Her eyes burned with grief. How is that right? How are you any different from the humans you claim to hate? You are killing harmless innocents who just want to live. Does having strength now make it right to crush them like that spider years ago? Junsei's 6 eyes watched her calmly before saying, You are the one who doesn't understand. I am not acting out of ignorance, but of the history of your kind and how it came to be. Kimmy said angrily, then explain it to me. What justifies your madness? Chapter 105, The Bridge That Was Destroyed. 1741 words. Junsei and Kimmy sat on the floor of the shelter with their backs against the wall. Both had their knees drawn to their chests. It was the same position they had once sat in years ago inside the orphanage. The animals around them rested quietly, sensing no hostility between the two. Junsei told her everything. He spoke about the beginning of the world, about the first stirrings of life long before stars had names or humans walked the earth. He told her about the endless cycle of evolution, how life changed and adapted across billions of years. About the strange creature that stole the fruit and eventually became the first humans. He explained how humanity evolved from that moment. How they devoured him again and again throughout his countless lives. How pieces of him became their power. What they called quirks. How the abilities humans of today possessed were born from stolen fragments of life itself. Junsei told her about his memories, about the endless chain of lives that led to his current existence. And about the truth he had finally understood. For a long time he had wanted to kill humans. But he was afraid. I did not have the confidence, Junsei said quietly. I always thought I couldn't do it. Kimmy listened without interrupting. Finally she asked the question that had been building inside her. What changed? Junsei looked forward, his 6 eyes dimly glowing. I learned the truth of how humans gained their power, he replied. How they evolved. They took it from me. From life. His voice grew colder. Why should we fear them when we are the source of their power? Why should we fear them when we have the numbers? When they are nothing without us. Kimmy lowered her head slightly. All of this, she said slowly. It's hard to believe. Junsei said, that doesn't make it any less true. He glanced at her. You are a human. Of course you think what I'm doing is wrong. But this is the correct path. I must kill all humans. You included. Kimmy remained quiet for a moment before speaking again. But you're not killing me, she said softly. And you're allowing UA to exist even if temporarily. Junsei replied, I don't know. I know it is not the right thing to do. I should kill all of you. His fingers tightened slightly around his knees. But I couldn't help showing mercy. A few acts of kindness, or a few good humans, are not enough to wash away the sinful existence of your species. Silence returned between them before Kimmy spoke again. Can't humans and life coexist? Junsei shook his head immediately. We are fundamentally incompatible. He looked at the animals resting quietly around the shelter. I believe I was born in this body to live among humans long enough to understand them. And then end them. The current life of mine is life's answer to the existence of humans. Kimmy frowned slightly and asked, what if you're wrong? Junsei didn't hesitate, life existed long before humans appeared. It will continue even without them. Kimmy shook her head. That's not what I mean. She turned toward him. What if you were born human for a different reason? Junsei remained silent. What if you were meant to become a bridge between both sides? Junsei shook his head again. That cannot happen. As long as humans live, they tear life apart. Kimmy thought for a moment before speaking again, but you said life is stored inside quirks. Junsei nodded slightly, it fuels them. Kimmy pressed, then what if there's a way to release that life without hurting humans? Junsei's eyes narrowed slightly, I tried. Kimmy blinked. Junsei nodded, with the help of the Yakuza. We attempted to erase quirks entirely. The heroes destroyed the drug and stopped the plan. That and Overhaul's final act made it clear that there is no other path. Kimmy looked down, absorbing the information. Junsei continued, humans are greedy, hungry, and self-entitled. They will never willingly give up their power. They will continue stealing from life and abusing the creatures of this world, thinking everything is their right. Kimmy answered firmly, no, you are wrong, they can stop, Junsei replied calmly. I am not. Taking from life is their only way to live. Their value of self is tied to taking. Kimmy exhaled slowly. You killed heroes. You destroyed an entire country. And according to you, the same thing is happening across the world. She looked directly at him. You've become something worse than any villain. A natural disaster. A symbol of terror. Junsei said nothing. If you threatened humanity with extinction unless they changed, Kimmy continued, people would listen. Her voice grew quieter. If the choice was coexistence or annihilation, humanity would eventually choose coexistence. We can find a way to stop tearing life to find balance. Junsei frowned slightly, I do not want coexistence. Kimmy immediately responded. Junsei didn't answer. You're sparing some people right now, she said gently. You're clearly conflicted. You saw something in some of the humans that made you hesitate. Junsei remained silent. Kimmy sighed, I can't believe I'm saying this. She rubbed her forehead tiredly. But terrifying humanity into coexistence and obedience sounds far better than exterminating everyone. She paused before continuing, and besides, humans have changed the world too. They pushed life forward. Junsei glanced at her. New species of animals were created. Plants were improved. Entire ecosystems changed. Junsei countered, at the cost of countless other possibilities and tearing life apart. Kimmy nodded, yes. But they didn't know, and isn't that the cycle you talked about? The cycle of giving, sacrifice, and evolution. Because of them, you were born this time as a human, and you discovered the truth of your nature and life. Junsei did not respond. Kimmy looked down at the animals resting around them. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic. But there has to be another way. She looked back at him. Destroying what we fear or don't understand is a very human response. You said it yourself. You're not human. You can choose a different path from what we humans would choose. Junsei fell completely silent. His thoughts drifted elsewhere. To the last words spoken by All for One. In a strange way, Kimmy's words echoed those same ideas. Junsei hated admitting it. Everything that human had said was true. Fear and power indeed is the answer to move the world. Junsei remained seated against the wall, unmoving. Kimmy didn't speak anymore, she let the shelter fall quiet. The animals nearby kept watching silently. Eventually, Kimmy sighed softly. Please think about it, she said. There has to be an answer other than mass murder. She pushed herself up from the floor, stretching stiff muscles. We have been talking for a while, and I still need to feed the little fellas. The animals immediately perked up as she stood. Dogs wagged their tails, rabbits hopped forward, and several cats followed her as she walked toward the back rooms where the food was stored. Kimmy stopped after a few steps. "This place is going to run out of food soon," she said over her shoulder. "Is really safe, can you take me there?" Her voice softened slightly. "With them too? I don't dare to go alone." Junsei looked up at her. Then he nodded once. Kimmy relaxed slightly. "All right," she said. "Once I finish feeding them, I'll pack my things." She disappeared into the back rooms. The animals followed her eagerly, already anticipating food. Junsei stayed where he was. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, the world exploded. A deafening blast tore through the shelter, shaking the ground violently. The walls shattered outward as the roof collapsed instantly. Concrete, metal, and wood crashed down in a violent avalanche. The entire building crumbled. Junsei barely had time to register what had happened before the rubble buried him completely. But before the dust even settled, the debris shifted violently. Junsei pushed upward. Concrete slabs shattered as he forced his way through the collapsed structure. Steel beams bent like paper under his grip. Within seconds he emerged from the wreckage, fragments of the building falling away from his body. Junsei stepped out into the open air. And froze. His 6 glowing eyes widened. The sky above the city was filled with missiles. Hundreds of them. They streaked downward like falling stars, leaving trails of smoke behind them as they descended toward the city. Then the impacts began. Explosions erupted across the horizon. Entire blocks vanished in fire and shockwaves. Buildings collapsed instantly under the bombardment. The ground trembled repeatedly as more detonations followed. It looked as if someone had decided to erase the entire region. Junsei stood in the middle of the devastation, watching silently for a moment. Then he turned sharply. He focused his senses. Searching. He tried to locate the animals first, relying on the connection he shared with all living things. But there was nothing. Not a single signal. All of them were gone. Junsei moved instantly. He leapt toward the section of the ruins where Kimmy had gone moments earlier, and began tearing through the rubble. Concrete blocks flew aside. Twisted metal snapped apart as he dug deeper and deeper. Kimmy was quirkless. Unlike the humans with quirks, he couldn't detect her through the connection to life. Which meant he had no way of knowing whether she was alive. He dug faster. Seconds stretched painfully. Finally his hand reached something beneath the debris. Junsei pulled the rubble aside. Then he stopped. What remained of Kimmy lay beneath the collapsed structure. Her body had been crushed by the falling concrete, and torn apart by the explosion. Blood soaked the debris around her. One arm was twisted beneath the rubble. There was no life left in her. Junsei didn't move. Not for several seconds. His hands slowly clenched into fists. Then he lifted his head. Far above the city, dozens of jet fighters cut through the sky. Their engines roared as they approached the area in tight formation. Several of the aircraft carried figures standing on external platforms. Costumed figures. They were heading directly toward him. Junsei's 6 eyes began to glow brighter. A violent light ignited inside them. Junsei felt pure rage burn inside him again. He roared, shaking the entire city. Chapter 106, The World's Strongest Heroes 2014 Words. Junsei's war had never been confined to Japan. While his focus remained on systematically cleansing the country, the ripple of his influence spread across the entire planet. Animals everywhere had risen in response to his will. Forests became hunting grounds. Cities turned into battlefields. Attacks erupted across every continent. In quiet homes, crowded streets, ports and even seas. Birds descended in violent swarms. Insects overwhelmed entire neighborhoods. Creatures of land and sea moved with a unity humanity had never witnessed before. The attacks were merciless. Millions had already died and millions more were injured. The reports arriving from Japan made the situation even worse. News channels across the globe broadcast horrifying footage of entire cities overrun by infected civilians. What began as an attack on heroes had turned into what many now described as a zombie infestation. Fear spread across the world. And with it came chaos. Crime rates exploded worldwide as governments struggled to maintain order. Panic buying, riots, and violent incidents broke out in major cities. Some people claimed the end of humanity had begun. All of this had happened in just 1 week. What would happen after more time, and when Junsei turned his full attention toward the rest of the world? The global governments came to the same conclusion. This madness had to end as soon as possible. A massive international intervention was approved. The world's greatest heroes would be deployed to Japan. 100 of the strongest heroes from across the world were assembled for the mission. At their head stood the most powerful hero outside Japan. Star and Stripe. Their objective was to kill Junsei at any cost. To guarantee success, governments decided to level the battlefield before the heroes even arrived. Ballistic missiles would be launched first to eliminate all infected civilians, animals, and environmental obstacles in the target area. Some officials questioned the brutality of the plan. But the majority agreed. No risks could be taken. A villain capable of turning the animal kingdom against humanity could not be allowed to escape. If he chose to hide while he continued the attacks, it would spell disaster to all countries. Satellites quickly tracked Junsei's general location, and the missiles were launched as the heroes approached the target area. They rained down across the region in overwhelming numbers. An entire district was erased from existence. Was anyone still alive there? The official answer was a resounding no, regardless of the truth. At the same time, satellites and aircraft cameras broadcast everything live to the entire world. The populace needed proof that the nightmare would end. Proof that Junsei would fall. It was the fastest way to make things go back to normal. As for Japan's opinion on this operation, it didn't matter. Japan had lost most of its heroes and its ability to contain the situation. They had no right to object on how the rest of the world had to fix their failure. The camera feeds showed nothing but ruins where the missiles had struck. Then, a roar echoed through the broadcast. The cameras shifted and focused into the distance. Standing on the smoking rubble below was Junsei. He was shirtless, his body covered in dust and blood. 6 glowing eyes burned with monstrous light beneath his horn. His claws flexed menacingly as he stared up at the approaching jets. Across the world, millions watched. Many cheered their heroes. Smiles began to appear, believing the monster had finally been cornered, and was about to be defeated. As the jets approached, a faint blue light began pulsing across the shattered ground. Blue steam rose slowly from Junsei's body. Then he dropped onto all fours and jumped. The ground shattered beneath him as all 4 limbs launched him upward. The force of the leap sent him flying through the air several times faster than the speed of sound. The jets had no time to react. Junsei smashed directly into one of them. The aircraft exploded instantly. 5 heroes standing atop the jet vanished with it. The world watched in shock at the bloody loss from the start, unable to react. But the heroes moved. Star and Stripe was the first to do so. She leapt from her own jet, descending toward Junsei's falling form. New order, she commanded. The gravity beneath me is 20 times stronger. The rule took effect instantly. Junsei's body accelerated violently downward and slammed into the ground with crushing force. The earth cracked beneath him. Star and Stripe followed. New order. The air will move with my fist. She drove her fist downward. A massive pressure wave struck Junsei as he tried to stand. The invisible force hammered him back into the ground, crushing him deeper into the rubble. Earthquake! She called. Falling right behind was another hero. A massive burly man wearing brown armor, and a headband patterned like the American flag. I know, he answered. And the moment he landed on the ground, he slapped his fist into the ground. The earth erupted. A towering column of rock shot upward from the crater where Junsei had been pinned, launching him into the air atop the rising pillar. Dozens of heroes moved at once. They leapt from the jets like falling meteors. One hero wielding a spear slashed downward, releasing a massive energy wave that struck Junsei across the chest. Another hurled a gigantic spear of ice. A third summoned a bolt of lightning that crashed directly into him. Explosions and attacks rained down without pause. Junsei's body was struck again and again. The combined assault finally sent him flying. He crashed violently into the ground tens of meters away. Dust and debris filled the air. Star and Stripe watched with narrowed eyes. Junsei slowly stood up from the crater, the wounds covering his body were already closing. He glanced around as heroes kept coming down and surrounding him from all directions. While above, fighter jets continued to orbit the area. Star and Stripe's expression hardened. "Villain," she said coldly. "You will fall here." Junsei said nothing in response to Star and Stripe's declaration. His 6 glowing eyes watched the heroes surrounding him, then moved to the fighter jets circling above. Then Junsei moved. He suddenly slammed both of his hands into the ground with all the strength in his body while triggering a violent explosion at the same time. The earth shattered outward from the point of impact, cracks racing across the battlefield as massive slabs of rock lifted violently into the air. Entire sections of ground tilted and rose like broken plates, throwing many of the heroes off balance as they struggled to keep their footing. Star and Stripe reacted instantly. "New order," she commanded sharply. "Dust will turn into a fist that moves with mine." The rising dust condensed in front of her, forming a massive swirling construct that mimicked the movement of her arm. At the same time, the burly hero Earthquake slammed his armored fists into the ground beside her. His quirk seized control of the fractured terrain, stabilizing the lifting slabs and preventing the battlefield from collapsing entirely. But Junsei's attack had only been the beginning. Blood bullets erupted from his body in all directions, dozens of crimson projectiles heading the air toward the surrounding heroes. Yet before the attack could reach them, something strange happened. Every single bullet suddenly curved through the air. They changed direction simultaneously and flew toward one hero standing toward the back. The projectiles spiraled around his raised hand before compressing into a floating sphere of blood. The hero clenched his fist. The sphere froze in place. "Don't even think about it," he said calmly. Around them, the other heroes watched as Junsei stood momentarily exposed in the center of the crater he had created. Junsei did not hesitate. His body turned instantly toward the weakest section of the encirclement where fewer heroes were stationed. In the next moment he dashed forward with terrifying speed, attempting to break through the gap. But someone was already waiting. A lone hero leapt directly into his path. Junsei swung his fist forward with crushing force. To his surprise, when the punch was about to connect with the hero's face, a strange pink light covered his fist. When the punch connected, there was no impact at all, the pink light nullified it completely. At the same time, the hero retaliated. He thrust his hand forward and pressed his palm toward Junsei's chest. A burst of golden light erupted from his hand like a cannon blast. Junsei was hurled backward and slammed violently back into the crater, the ground cracking further under the impact. Before he could rise, another attack followed. The giant fist made of compressed dust came crashing down from above, smashing into Junsei and forcing him onto one knee inside the crater. Star and Stripe stepped closer, her expression cold. "We know about your tricks," she said. "Nothing you do will work against us." She raised her hand again. "New order. The air inside the crater before me will be gone." The effect was immediate. Junsei felt his lungs collapse as the air around him vanished, his mouth opened involuntarily, and blood spilled out as the pressure crushed his chest from the inside. The heroes did not waste the opportunity. Attacks rained down from every direction. Energy waves, lightning strikes, massive spears of ice, explosions of flame, dozens of abilities struck him simultaneously. Each blow forced him deeper into the crater, as the ground continued collapsing beneath the relentless assault. Dust and debris filled the air. Junsei groaned under the barrage. The attacks continued for several seconds before finally stopping. One hero stepped forward slightly and laughed. "Not so tough now, are you, villain?" The dust cloud slowly drifted through the air. Seconds passed. There was no movement. Several heroes frowned. Star and Stripe narrowed her eyes slightly. Something about the silence felt wrong. She reached upward and touched the dust drifting around her. "New order," she said. "The dust will rise 100 meters above me." Immediately the entire cloud shot upward like a massive column, clearing the battlefield in an instant. The ground became visible again, and the heroes' expressions changed. Junsei was gone. Only a deep hole remained where he had been buried. "Damn it," one hero cursed. He escaped underground. The formation shifted as the heroes were about to begin searching the area. Then suddenly a hand burst from the ground beside Star and Stripe. The arm shot upward and grabbed the hero controlling the earth before anyone could react. The man screamed as golden light erupted around his body. The light intensified and then he vanished completely. Erased from existence. Star and Stripe responded instantly. "New order," she commanded. "The ground will split open 10 meters in front of me." The earth tore apart immediately. A massive crack opened in the ground, exposing the tunnel beneath. Junsei stood there staring upward at her. His horn glowed with golden light. Not a single wound can be seen on his body. A hero nearby reacted instantly. The spear wielder lunged forward and thrust his weapon ahead. A massive energy wave burst from the strike and slammed into Junsei's chest, launching him dozens of meters away across the battlefield. Junsei crashed into the ground. But the situation had already changed. From 3 different locations across the battlefield, the earth erupted again. Junsei's clones burst upward from beneath the surface. Before the heroes could react, the clones lunged directly into their ranks. Several heroes were caught off guard and torn apart instantly as the clones bit and ripped through them. Screams filled the battlefield. The heroes reacted quickly, turning their attacks toward the clones and suppressing them before they could inflict further damage. Junsei slowly stood where he had landed. His 6 glowing eyes watched the battlefield calmly as his clones tried to break free and kill the heroes. Several heroes already lay dead. Junsei spoke, his voice cold. "You will all die here." Star and Stripe's face twisted with rage. "You damn villain." Chapter 107, Humanity's Best vs. Junsei. 2007 words A/N. Hello everyone, I will keep this short. I recently started posting a new story, DC, Winging a Cursed Life. It is a very different kind of story from this one, so if you are interested in seeing something new from me, please take a look. Junsei assessed the battlefield. The heroes were no longer fully surrounding him. His 3 clones had succeeded in forcing them to split their formation. Roughly half of the heroes were now focused on attacking and destroying the clones, while the other half remained locked onto Junsei himself, maintaining pressure so he could not escape. It was still problematic. But the situation was better than before. Being surrounded by all of these heroes was nearly impossible to deal with. Dividing their attention created openings, even if they were small ones. The real problem now was that he did not know the heroes fighting him. He did not know what abilities they possessed. And that could easily get him trapped. Junsei's 6 eyes moved across the battlefield, studying the fighters one by one. Then his gaze stopped. Star and Stripe. The strongest hero outside Japan. Some even claimed she surpassed All Might. From the brief exchanges they had already had, Junsei believed he understood part of her ability. Her quirk allowed her to control the environment itself, manipulating forces around her. But it did not seem to give her direct physical strength or speed. She was among the more troublesome humans, but relatively easy to eliminate. Without her, the difficulty of this fight would dramatically drop. Junsei launched forward without hesitation. The ground cracked beneath his feet, as he accelerated straight toward Star and Stripe. However, before he could reach her, the spear-wielding hero once again intercepted him, stepping directly into his path. Junsei narrowed his eyes. The hero thrust his spear forward with perfect timing. Junsei tilted his body to the side, letting the tip pass harmlessly beside him while sending a counter-punch toward the man's head. But the moment his fist was about to connect, the pink light appeared again. The same strange phenomenon that had nullified his attack earlier repeated itself, and his punch did nothing. The spear hero used the moment to retaliate, swinging the weapon in a wide arc aimed at Junsei's neck. Junsei stepped backward just in time to avoid it. Instead of attacking again, Junsei's gaze shifted. He began searching. His eyes scanned the battlefield rapidly. The pink light was clearly protecting the heroes from his physical attacks. Whoever possessed that quirk was a priority target. He needed to eliminate them. But no matter where he looked, nothing stood out. No glowing pink light, or any hero with a costume bearing the color anywhere. Then suddenly something crashed into his side. The blow knocked Junsei slightly off balance, just enough to create an opening. The spear hero took advantage of the moment instantly and drove his weapon forward. The spear pierced into Junsei's torso. Junsei did not even try to punch back. Instead, electricity erupted from him. A violent current surged through the metal spear, and directly into the hero holding it. The man screamed as the electricity tore through his body, his muscles locking and convulsing violently as the current burned through his nerves. But before the attack could finish him, the spear hero suddenly vanished in a blur. Junsei's eyes followed the direction of the blur. A new hero appeared several dozen meters away, carrying the injured spear fighter away from the fight. The man glanced toward Junsei before retreating further with incredible speed. Speed quirk. Junsei immediately categorized the ability, and realized he was the one who struck his side earlier. But before he could decide how to move next, the ground beneath him shifted violently. A massive column of rock erupted upward, lifting him into the air. Junsei's first thought was that another Earth controller was among the heroes. Then he looked up. Towering above him was a gigantic figure made entirely of swirling dust and fog. A colossal star and stripe. The enormous construct looked down at him. Junsei knew a powerful attack was coming. He bent his legs and prepared to jump away from the rising pillar. But the moment he pushed off, the pink light appeared again. This time it surrounded his foot. His jump collapsed instantly, the force that should be there had been nullified, making him fall to the side awkwardly. Before Junsei could react or compose himself, the giant star and stripe brought both hands together with a powerful clap, crushing Junsei's body along with the pillar. The shockwave generated by the clap alone was devastating, filling the world in a powerful wind and loud sound. When the giant hands separated, Junsei's body dropped through the air. Blood covered his skin despite the durability of his body. The impact had broken his skin and bone alike. The giant construct did not stop. It followed his fall with a powerful punch midair that launched him flying hundreds of meters, before crashing violently into through buildings in the distance. The last building shattered, and began collapsing atop of his body. Across the battlefield, his clones were not faring much better. The heroes attacking them had been overwhelming them through sheer numbers and a variety of abilities. The clones struggled to keep up with the coordinated assault. Star and Stripe and heroes began moving toward Junsei as he rose slowly among the destroyed area. "Keep attacking him," she ordered calmly. "Remember, his regeneration must consume stamina." Her voice carried across the battlefield with certainty. "It's only a matter of time before he can't regenerate anymore." The surrounding heroes nodded. Then suddenly a new warning came through their earpieces. "Movement detected from the west." Several heroes turned toward the horizon. What they saw made their expressions tighten. A massive wave of figures was approaching the battlefield. The infected. Thousands of them were rushing toward the heroes. Among them were several Japanese heroes who had fallen during the first battles. At their front walked one towering figure. Star and Stripe's expression hardened. "Send the next wave of missiles," she ordered. "We cannot fight all of them at once." A moment later the reply came through the communication channel. "The missiles are already on their way." Junsei had heard Star and Stripe clearly. His 6 eyes shifted toward the west where his infected army was advancing, then toward the horizon. For a brief moment he stood still, searching. Then he saw them. Tiny black dots moving rapidly through the sky. Dozens of them. Junsei's mind raced through the possibilities in an instant. Then he moved immediately. But instead of charging toward the heroes, Junsei turned and sprinted east, directly toward the incoming missiles. His body blurred across the ruined terrain, before he suddenly dropped onto all fours in preparation to jump. The ground shattered beneath him, as he propelled himself forward like a living projectile. As the missiles closed in, Junsei opened his mouth wide. From within erupted a massive stream of thick spider silk. The sticky substance shot upward like a web, spreading across the sky, and attaching itself to a third of the incoming missiles. The missiles continued their forward momentum even after Junsei's silk had connected, dragging Junsei with them. Junsei grabbed the silk strands with both hands. Using all of his strength, Junsei rotated his body in midair while holding the attached threads. The captured missiles were dragged along with him, their guidance systems struggling as their direction changed. The rotation accelerated. Then Junsei released them. The captured missiles shot away in a new direction, straight toward the unsuspecting heroes who had been fighting his clones. Meanwhile the missiles that had escaped his web continued forward. Both groups struck their targets almost simultaneously. Explosions thundered across the battlefield. 2 separate fireballs erupted. One among the advancing infected army. The other where the heroes had been attacking the clones. Star and Stripe did not even glance toward the infected casualties. Neither did the other heroes. Their attention remained locked on the massive explosion where their own allies had been moments earlier. Smoke and fire filled the air. Then movement appeared within the destruction. From the flames, the 3 clones emerged. Their bodies were damaged but already regenerating as they walked forward calmly until they stood beside Junsei once again. On the opposite side of the blast, several heroes stumbled out of the debris. Their costumes were scorched and their bodies injured, but they had survived. However, many didn't make it out. Star and Stripe's expression hardened. They had likely lost at least 20 heroes in that blast alone. She stared at Junsei. "That damn monster." Another hero nearby spoke urgently. "We have another problem." Several heroes turned west. The tide of the infected had been reduced significantly, but figures were still approaching. And at the forefront Endeavor, Mirko and Ryukyu. Star and Stripe made her decision immediately. "We'll divide again," she ordered. "One team intercepts them. The rest stay here." Several heroes nodded and rushed forward to block the advancing infected. Star and Stripe continued speaking through her earpiece. "Deploy the anti-quirk dome around him." A voice responded instantly. "Roger that. Everyone be careful not to enter the affected area." Junsei heard every word and his eyes narrowed. Anti-quirk dome. He remembered that technology. It is the technology Mr. Yayorozu had been working in the United States. He knew the project was designed to stop humans with powerful quirks. However, his power doesn't come from a quirk, so that didn't work on him. Star and Stripe continued her orders calmly. "Prepare the laser weapon. Fire on my command." Junsei's instincts flared immediately. The humans were preparing something. He frowned slightly, deciding not to wait. Whatever they were planning, he would interrupt it before it was complete. Junsei moved. But suddenly the fighter jets above opened fire. Dozens of black spear-like rods shot downward from the aircraft and embedded themselves in the ground around him in a wide circle. Junsei glanced at them briefly, assuming they were some kind of missile. Instead, the rods began glowing. Green light pulsed through them. The moment it activated, agony exploded inside Junsei's skull. He groaned, staggering slightly as pain ripped through his mind like lightning. His hands rose instinctively to his head as the sensation intensified. Near him, his 3 clones reacted the same way. Their horns sparked violently as green energy wrapped around them. Junsei realized what had happened. The anti-quirk dome. He thought it was going to cancel quirks like Eraserhead, but he was wrong. It is designed to attack and destabilize quirks, and he had Ares' quirk. He clenched his teeth as the pain continued pulsing through his mind. His gaze shifted toward the glowing rods surrounding him. Destroy them. That was the solution. But before he could move, a brilliant light appeared above him. Junsei looked up. High in the sky, the giant construct of Star and Stripe loomed once again. In its massive hands it held a gigantic spear made entirely of condensed energy. Junsei's 6 eyes widened slightly. The dome distracted him, while the spear finished him. Junsei gritted his teeth as the glowing weapon descended toward him and his clones. In an instant, he was engulfed with the energy. The crushing energy went on for seconds before it finally disappeared. The area where Junsei stood was melting due to the sheer heat, and even the rods were destroyed completely. One of the heroes said to Star, "Did you get him with that?" Star and Stripe replied, "No, but it should have weakened him further." True to her words, Junsei emerged from behind the smoke with a blackened body that was already recovering. But all 3 of his clones were gone. Star and Stripe said, "I refuse to believe a human can keep going at it forever. I am sure he is reaching his limit." Junsei's eyes glowed as his body recovered fully. Chapter 108, The Last Protocol. 1780 words. The 2 sides stared at each other, neither backing down. But before either make any move, something strange began to happen among the heroes. One of them, standing beside Star and Stripe, suddenly dropped to his knees as he clutched his stomach. "Feel sick," he muttered weakly. Several others staggered as well. A few heroes lost their footing entirely, their balance failing them as if the ground had suddenly tilted beneath their feet. Star and Stripe turned sharply, alarm flashing across her face. "What's wrong with you all?" Then her own vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to clear the haze from her eyes. Her breathing slowed slightly as she tried to understand what was happening. Then she noticed a strange odor lingering in the air. "What is this smell?" she muttered. Another hero nearby looked around and spoke grimly, "His blood." The heroes followed his gaze. Scattered across the ground were tiny droplets left behind from Junsei's earlier wounds. The spots of blood bubbled as if heated from within. The blood-controlling hero reacted instantly. He gathered the boiling droplets into the air with his power and flung them far away from himself and the rest of the heroes. Star and Stripe moved at the same time. New order. The air within 50 meters of me will be replaced with new air. A rush of wind swept through the area as the atmosphere shifted. The strange smell vanished almost immediately. Several heroes exhaled in relief. One of them steadied himself, still visibly dizzy. "That freak's blood releases some kind of toxin," he said. "It is affecting us already." Star and Stripe didn't answer. Because she felt it too. A faint dizziness lingered in her head despite the fresh air. Her eyes shifted toward Junsei. He stood silently watching them. Her expression hardened. "That bastard isn't attacking," she said quietly. "He's waiting for the toxin to weaken us further." At that moment a voice spoke through their earpieces. "Can you determine the toxin's effect?" Star and Stripe replied quickly. "It's difficult to determine this too quickly. But I suspect it will only get worse from here. The voice responded, change of plans. A brief pause followed. We're initiating the last protocol. Star and Stripe stiffened. But sir, that was supposed to be used as a last resort, the voice cut her off. The infected army is still approaching from behind you. A large portion of your team is dead, injured or poisoned, and the animals have not appeared yet. We cannot continue like this while hoping the monster eventually reaches his limit. And if he manages to escape, I doubt he would allow himself to be in such a position again. He could even go into hiding. The speaker's tone grew colder. Cassie, there is a forest east of your position beyond the mountain. You know what you need to do. Star and Stripe closed her eyes briefly. Then she answered. Yes, sir. She turned toward the heroes beside her. A tall hero wearing a red costume with a golden plus symbol on both his forehead and chest nodded. Star and Stripe raised her voice, you heard the order. Her gaze moved toward Junsei. Attack him with everything you have. The surrounding heroes who still could fight nodded and rushed forward together. Across the battlefield, Junsei saw the movement. He immediately dropped onto all fours, preparing to launch himself forward with maximum speed. But before he could move, pink light wrapped around his limbs. Junsei paused for half a second, his 6 eyes scanning the charging heroes rapidly until he found the source. A muscular hero wearing a blue costume stood among them. Tiny white wing-like ornaments decorated his outfit, and his eyes glowed with the same pink light surrounding Junsei's body. Junsei narrowed his eyes. This time he did not allow his movement to fail. Instead of relying on muscle strength to propel himself forward, Junsei detonated a controlled explosion beneath his body. The blast launched him forward despite the suppression affecting his limbs. His target switched to the pink light hero. Junsei rushed toward him at terrifying speed, and opened his mouth. A massive sonic attack erupted from his throat, the destructive sound wave tearing through the ground toward the advancing heroes. But one of them reacted instantly. A defensive barrier formed in front of the group, absorbing the sonic blast as the others launched their own attacks. Energy waves, lightning bolts, and explosive strikes flew toward Junsei. Junsei dodged them as he continued his advance using explosions burst from his hands, his feet as he redirected his momentum, and his muscles flexed just like All Might. Junsei almost seemed unaffected by the pink energy interfering anymore. Still, it was not enough to deal with the heroes. They were surrounding him slowly without allowing him to approach any of them. There were still too many of them, and they were well coordinated. Gradually the circle around him tightened. Finally Junsei leapt upward to avoid a barrage of attacks coming from 3 different directions. The moment he entered the air, someone was already waiting for him. The giant Star and Stripe. The enormous dust construct swung its arm and struck him midair. Junsei's body was sent flying eastward like a cannonball. At that exact moment the fighter jets above fired again. A blazing beam of laser energy descended from the sky. The giant Star and Stripe caught the beam in its massive hands, shaping the laser into a colossal spear of burning light. She pulled back her arm. Below her, Amp raised his hand. A gigantic golden sphere formed directly in front of the laser spear. Star and Stripe hurled the spear of energy forward and passed through the golden sphere. The moment it did, its speed multiplied dozens of times. It struck Junsei in midair and carried him like a projectile across the sky, launching him beyond the mountain range and deep into the forest beyond. Star and Stripe spoke urgently, all jet fighters are to evacuate now. The rest rally to me now. The laser spear carried Junsei across the sky like a comet. His body traveled through the air for several kilometers before the force finally released him. He crashed deep within the forest with a thunderous impact, tearing through trees and earth before the momentum finally died out. For a moment, the forest fell silent again. Junsei slowly rose from the crater he had carved into the ground. Blood covered parts of his body, but the wounds were already closing. He looked around. Recognition came quickly. This was his forest, where he had lived years ago. Why would they push him all the way here? Junsei frowned as he climbed out of the crater. At first, he wondered if the heroes had simply lost control of the attack and sent him too far by accident, or were they trying to buy time? But he dismissed both ideas immediately. Those heroes had shown discipline and coordination throughout the battle. They believed they would eventually exhaust his regeneration and defeat him. They would not willingly allow him distance after all the effort they had spent trapping him. Especially when his escape remained a possibility. Junsei considered another explanation. Perhaps they knew about his past here, and intended to fight him in the forest, hoping he would hesitate to use his full power in fear of destroying the environment and the wildlife. That idea seemed more plausible. But even that had a flaw. It would only work if they reached the forest first. Junsei had no intention of letting them fight here. He would return to the city first and keep the battlefield away from this place. The forest would not become a casualty of this war. Junsei closed his eyes briefly and reached outward through the connection he shared with his infected puppets. Through their senses he could observe the battlefield the heroes had left behind. What he saw surprised him. The heroes had not followed him. Instead they had gathered together in the city, constructing massive defensive walls facing his direction. Layers of rock and energy barriers were being raised rapidly. The fighter jets were gone. Junsei opened his eyes slowly. He did not understand. Were they afraid he would rush back toward them? That seemed unlikely. The heroes had shown no fear during the battle. But then another thought surfaced. They were planning something. Something they feared would harm them as well. Junsei felt an unfamiliar sense of unease settle in his chest. What were the humans preparing? He moved quickly, leaping onto the top of a nearby tree to gain a better view. His 6 glowing eyes scanned the horizon in every direction. There was nothing anywhere. For several seconds, the forest remained completely still. Then Junsei noticed something above him. The clouds were parting. Junsei lifted his gaze upward and saw it. A massive missile descending from the sky at terrifying speed. Junsei barely had time to react before the weapon reached him. Then light consumed everything. The explosion swallowed the forest, the mountain, and the sky itself. For a moment the world became nothing but blinding light. Far away, the heroes protected themselves well. They stood behind walls of rock and massive energy shields as the horizon erupted into a pillar of light. The ground trembled beneath their feet, as if the earth itself was screaming. The shockwave arrived seconds later. An earthquake rippled across the region. Buildings in the distant city began to crumble under the violent tremors while the approaching infected army was thrown backward by the blast of wind. The sky itself seemed to roar. One hero stared at the distant mushroom cloud forming over the distance. I never thought I'd see the day we'd do something like this for a single person. Star and Stripe watched the rising column of smoke with a grim expression. When I heard years ago about the plan to nuke a person if their quirk proved to be too dangerous to the world, I thought it was just an extreme measure that would never be needed. Most believed the same. But that monster proved us all wrong. She said quietly. Her voice carried a note of exhaustion. That entire area will be contaminated by radiation now. Another hero glanced behind them toward the battlefield. The freakish army. It stopped. He pointed toward the distant figures of the infected. They're not moving anymore. A different hero exhaled slowly. I guess that confirms it. Silence settled among them as they watched the cloud continue rising into the sky. Good riddance. Chapter 109, The Death of Junsei. 1790 words. At the center of the nuclear blast, Junsei knelt alone. His body was barely intact. Much of his flesh had been burned away by the unimaginable heat of the detonation, leaving parts of his skeleton exposed to the air. Charred remnants of skin clung to his frame while blue veins ran across the bones beneath. His regeneration worked to rebuild him slowly. New flesh crept over the exposed bone, muscles reformed, and damaged organs struggled back into existence. Yet Junsei did not move. He remained frozen in place. The pain coursing through him was beyond anything he had ever felt before. It was not simply the pain of the nuclear blast tearing through his body. His regeneration could deal with that. This agony belonged to everything that had died. In one instant, the nuclear explosion had erased life across the forest. Insects, birds, animals, plants, every living thing within kilometers had been vaporized by the blast or crushed by the shockwave that followed. Through the connection that bound him to all life, Junsei experienced their final moments all at once. Millions of dying sensations collided in his mind. His thoughts vanished beneath the overwhelming suffering. Even as his body healed itself, Junsei remained trapped in that storm of pain. Around him the ground slowly changed. The earth that had been glowing molten from the nuclear heat gradually cooled, hardening into cracked black stone. Ash drifted through the silent air where a thriving forest had once stood. Nothing remained. And Junsei was motionless. 2 full minutes passed before his body finally moved again. His chest heaved violently as breath rushed back into his lungs. His eyes trembled as they darted in every direction, searching desperately for something, anything that still lived. His hand rose slowly to his chest. Then he collapsed forward, his body shaking uncontrollably. The words slipped from his mouth like broken fragments. Junsei forced himself to stand despite the trembling in his legs. He turned slowly, staring across the horizon in disbelief. Wherever he looked there was only devastation. Within several kilometers in every direction, nothing remained. The forest was gone. An enormous section of it had been completely erased by the nuclear blast. What remained beyond the immediate destruction was lifeless. The shockwave alone had killed everything that had survived the initial explosion. Junsei's expression froze in stunned horror as the realization settled over him. His extra eyes slowly closed. The monstrous features that had grown disappeared as his body returned to its human form. His tail withdrew. His claws receded. The glowing veins beneath his skin dimmed. Junsei dropped to his knees. His breathing grew faster and more uneven with every passing second. Far from the battlefield, the entire world watched. Live broadcasts had followed the battle between Junsei and the International Hero Coalition from beginning to end. Tens of millions of people had gathered around televisions and screens, witnessing the monster who had plunged the world into chaos. There had been moments when the crowd cheered as the heroes fought back against him. There had also been moments when the cheers turned to silence as Junsei retaliated against them. But the greatest shock had come when the nuclear weapon was launched. The decision alone spoke volumes about the threat Junsei represented. No villain in history had forced humanity to resort to such a weapon. When the sky lit up with the blinding light of the explosion, the world held its breath. Then people began noticing the infected across the battlefield. The humans and heroes who had been turned into Junsei's puppets suddenly stopped moving. Their glowing veins remained, but their bodies dropped. For a moment the entire world went silent. Then celebration erupted everywhere. Cities across the globe cheered. The monster was dead. The nightmare has finally ended and things will go back to normal. But the celebration did not last long. A few minutes later, the infected began moving again. The cheers vanished. Shock replaced them. Thousands of people were gathered inside the school watching the battle on massive screens. Students, teachers, and refugees had been following every moment of the fight. Principal Nisa stood quietly with the rest of the staff. He observed the battlefield carefully before speaking. Endeavor and the others have stopped moving, he said softly. It appears the nuclear strike succeeded. All Might stood beside him, his expression heavy. To resort to such a weapon against Junsei. He sighed. Japan will need decades to recover from the damage this disaster caused. No one responded, everyone chose silence. Then suddenly Midnight gasped. They're moving again. The infected on the battlefield were rising slowly. One after another they stood up again. Eraserhead frowned deeply. What the hell is happening now? Nisa said it must be Junsei. He had survived, but something even stranger happened next. The infected began crying and wailing. Their bodies trembled as tears streamed down their faces. The sound of their cries echoed across the battlefield. Nisa narrowed his eyes. At that moment the broadcast changed. The cameras switched to a satellite view focusing on the center of the nuclear blast zone. The image zoomed in. And there he was. He sat alone in the wasteland, back to his human looks. For the first time since being born as a human, Junsei shed tears. The entire world watched him as his shoulders shook violently. His hands moved again and again to wipe his eyes, but the tears would not stop falling. And then people noticed something else. The tears running down his face were blue. Each tear struck the scorched ground beneath him and vanished into the ash. But something began to change the moment the first drops touched the earth. A faint blue glow spread outward from where the tears landed, moving silently through the cracked soil. Then the glow surged. Light burst across the land at a speed no eye could truly follow. Within seconds it expanded for kilometers in every direction, racing through the ruined forest and across the devastated city beyond. The blue light did not slow. It continued spreading outward across plains, rivers, mountains, and shattered towns. The entire region was swallowed by the glow, as if the earth itself had awakened. Within moments the light had traveled hundreds of kilometers. And it was still expanding. At UA, alarms began sounding as the strange phenomenon reached the campus. The blue glow arrived like a wave washing across the ground. The buildings, the trees, everything pulsed with a faint blue radiance as the light passed through the area. Teachers and refugees looked around in shock. What is this? The entire world seemed to shimmer. Nisa stood among the staff when the light reached them. The moment it touched him, his body began trembling violently. Tears streamed down his face before he even realized they were falling. Elsewhere on the campus, Class 1A watched the phenomenon unfold along with their families and the civilians. The blue glow rushed across the grounds and passed through the students like wind through leaves. Momo froze as the light engulfed her. Everyone stared in disbelief. Then something drew their attention. The small bird perched calmly on Momo's shoulder suddenly began trembling. Her eyes glowed bright blue as tears formed and rolled down the tiny creature's face. The bird cried loudly. A long, sorrowful sound. Everyone turned toward her. Across the world, the blue light continued spreading. It crossed oceans, continents, deserts, and mountains without slowing. The seas themselves began glowing faintly beneath the waves as the light passed through them. Within minutes the phenomenon reached every corner of the planet. The entire earth pulsed blue. And something else began happening. Animals everywhere started crying. Birds wailed in the skies. Insects buzzed erratically in distress. Creatures of the deep churned the oceans as if responding to a signal no human could understand. Even the forests reacted. Tree branches trembled violently though no wind moved them. The world itself seemed to mourn. Humans barely had time to process what was happening. Then everything changed again. Back in the wasteland where Junsei knelt, his body suddenly went still. The tears stopped falling. His face became expressionless once more, the same cold expression he had worn for his entire human life but only for a moment. Then his expression twisted into pure and uncontrollable rage. Junsei's fingers suddenly rose to his face. Without hesitation, he dug them into his own eyes and tore them out. Blood spilled down his cheeks as he screamed. His hands moved downward immediately, ripping open the flesh of his neck then his chest. The glowing blue orb within him pulsed violently as it was exposed fully. Junsei screamed again, the sound filled with anger beyond words. His hands plunged into the wound and tore the orb free from his body. For a brief moment he held it in his shaking hands. Then he crushed it. The orb shattered. Blue light erupted everywhere. Junsei's body began cracking apart immediately. His skin split into glowing fractures as his entire form started dissolving. Flesh turned into blue light and dust. The light rose higher into the sky, while dust fell silently into the earth beneath him. Within seconds, Junsei was gone. Completely. The world watched in complete confusion and shock. No one understood what they had just seen. Niza continued trembling, tears still falling from his eyes. That grief. He whispered. That pain. That anger. His voice shook. The lives he lived and the pain he feels, it is far worse than I could imagine. No wonder wanted to eradicate humanity. The staff looked at him in confusion. Niza wiped his face slowly. I just saw some of it. I felt only a little of what he feels. He closed his eyes briefly. I experienced the world through his eyes. Silence filled the room. He can't bear it anymore, Niza continued softly. So he killed himself. The others stared at him in disbelief. So that he would have nothing left to do with humans. Nizu's voice lowered further. But his intention remains the same. His gaze turned toward the screen where Junsei had disappeared. He still plans to kill everyone. All Might frowned deeply. I don't understand, he committed a suicide, then he would kill us. Eraserhead asked. Principal, what exactly is going on? Nizu looked toward them. He spoke the truth, he said quietly. When he dies, he always comes back. A heavy silence filled the room. Nizu said, he is the beginning without an end. He will not rest till all humans are dead. Nizu's words brought dread to everyone present. Chapter 110, The Birth of the World Demon 1689 words. Across Japan, the infected began to fall apart as the light of the blue flowers that had bloomed from their eyes suddenly intensified. The light brightened until it became almost blinding, then the flowers themselves dissolved into streams of blue energy. The bodies of the infected followed moments later, crumbling into fine particles of light and dust that rose gently into the air. It happened everywhere across the entire country. The world watched as the glowing dust lifted from the ground like countless fireflies and streamed toward the sky. Then the lights began to move. From every direction the glowing fragments rushed across the atmosphere, converging toward a single point above the devastated forest where Junsei had died. Thousands, then millions of glowing particles gathered together, merging into a vast luminous cloud. Soon the sky itself changed. Dark bluish clouds formed above the erased forest, swirling slowly, as if the heavens themselves were gathering strength. Then the rain began. It was blue light falling from the sky like shimmering droplets, drifting gently downward across the land. Every place the light touched seemed to glow softly, spreading across the ground like ripples across a lake. The heroes watching from the ruined city stared upward in disbelief. None of them understood what they were seeing. What the hell is happening? One of them whispered. Star and Stripe watched the sky with a grim expression, her unease was growing. The jet fighters soon returned to the area, flying cautiously toward the strange phenomenon. They were ordered to observe and provide better visuals to command. The aircraft circled the glowing clouds while cameras transmitted the images across the world. From every screen on the planet people watched. The falling light touched the earth. And the earth responded. Where the blue rain struck the ground, life began returning instantly. The cracked soil shifted as green shoots burst through the surface. In seconds the shoots thickened into trunks, branches stretching skyward as leaves unfolded. Trees grew with terrifying speed. Within a single minute the barren wasteland left behind by the nuclear blast was no longer empty. The forest had returned, rising where only ashes had existed moments earlier. The heroes stared in stunned silence. But something else began to grow among the trees. Something enormous. At the center of the reborn forest, a massive stem rose upward through the canopy. It climbed higher and higher until it towered above every tree in the area. The structure resembled the stalk of a flower. But its size was colossal. The stem alone was dozens of meters wide, glowing faintly blue as it continued growing upward. At its peak sat a massive bloom, its petals tightly closed like a giant lotus waiting for dawn. The jet fighters adjusted their formation, circling the structure carefully while cameras transmitted every detail to the world. No one spoke. Everyone was waiting. Then the flower began to open. The massive petals slowly unfolded one by one, revealing a dazzling blue light within. The brightness spilled across the forest like a beacon, sending shimmering particles drifting into the air like glowing snow. It was breathtaking. Beautiful. And a sense of dread filled the world, especially among humans who had quirks. They could feel their own quirk cry in terror. Some humans began to shake and tear instinctively. Because within the blooming flower stood an otherworldly being. Those who could still compose themselves focused entirely on the center of the lotus. The being was humanoid in shape but larger than the average human. Nearly 3 meters tall. Its body was smooth and pale white, like polished marble, yet deep blue accents ran along its limbs like flowing veins of energy. 2 glowing orbs were embedded vertically along its chest, pulsing softly like twin hearts. Its head was completely inhuman. 2 luminous horn-like projections extended upward, curving slightly as they emitted a steady glow. The face itself was featureless, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, only a radiant surface that shone with quiet intensity. From its back extended enormous wings. 4 pairs of them. They flowed outward like long ribbons of living light, stretching across the air in graceful arcs. The uppermost 2 pairs ended in strange, open forms, mouths filled with rows of sharp teeth, resembling serpentine creatures that breathed softly in the mist. The 3rd pair shimmered as pulses of glowing energy traveled through them like flowing currents. And the final pair, closest to the ground, bore luminous markings shaped like eyes. And below the wings, it had white tail ending with a glowing blue stinger. The creature stood silently atop the giant lotus flower, surrounded by drifting clouds and blue light. The towering creature standing upon the lotus-like flower did not resemble any earthly creature humanity had ever seen. It was as if the creature was born from mythical stories. Some whispered that it was Junsei transformed. Others believed it was something entirely different. The being's glowing head slowly turned toward the distant battlefield where the surviving heroes stood. Its featureless face somehow conveyed attention, as though it had already decided something. Then it moved. One moment it stood atop the flower. The next moment it was gone. It appeared directly in front of the remaining heroes. The displacement was so instantaneous that even the cameras couldn't follow it. The creature simply materialized before them, towering over the battlefield like a divine apparition. Behind it, the jet fighters circling the forest suddenly erupted into explosions. The aircrafts burst apart mid-air, fragments scattering across the sky before falling toward the ground in burning pieces. No one understood what had happened. The heroes standing before the creature began shaking uncontrollably. Their bodies trembled as a suffocating pressure filled the air around them. Even Star and Stripe felt her knees weaken beneath her. Her pupils shrank and her entire body trembled. The creature raised its tail slightly behind it. The motion was almost casual. Then the stinger at its tip flashed. Star and Stripe heard something heavy hitting the ground behind her. Confused, she turned slightly. What she saw froze her blood. Every hero standing behind her had collapsed. Their bodies still remained from the waist down, but their upper halves were simply gone. A thin red mist lingered in the air where their torsos had once existed. Star and Stripe slowly turned back toward the creature. She clenched her teeth, extending her hand toward him. She touched its stomach and called, "New order. Junsei will be torn." She didn't finish her words as an intense pain assaulted her, her veins bulged and her own body began tearing apart. She could only scream before falling on her knees. She looked up at the demon with pure terror in her eyes. Her own quirk rebelled against her when she touched him. She finally understood how truly insignificant she was before this creature. The terror grew into despair as her own eyes began tearing, and entire body shaking. The demon stared at her for a moment before its tail moved again. The stinger pierced straight through her head. She froze as her eyes began glowing blue. The creature remained motionless for a brief second before speaking. "I know you can hear me, Timothy Agpar." The words echoed clearly through the broadcast systems. "You are the one who ordered that nuclear attack." A pause followed. "You and your country will be the first to be wiped out." The creature looked at Star and Stripe. "New order," it said calmly. "This human before me will die from pain." Star and Stripe screamed. Her eyes rolled backward as her entire body convulsed violently. He forced her own quirk to turn against her body, ripping through her nerves and organs in unbearable agony. Her scream echoed across the battlefield. Then the creature disappeared. Star and Stripe collapsed completely to the ground, her body writhing until it finally went still. Thousands of kilometers away, inside a coastal military command center in the United States, the room erupted into chaos. The officers watching the live broadcast could barely comprehend what they had just seen. Someone shouted, "Find where that creature went." Operators rushed to their consoles, frantically scanning radar feeds and satellite imagery. Half a minute later one of the officers spoke, his voice shaking. "We detected an object heading toward us across the Pacific." He swallowed. "It's moving at Mach 20 at minimum." The command room fell silent. Admiral Timothy Agpar slowly looked up. "How long until it arrives?" The officer replied in a fearful tone. "Less than 2 minutes." The words landed like a death sentence. Agpar stood up immediately. "Prepare every available personnel and weapon to fight it," he ordered. "We must kill that monster at any cost." He turned and walked toward the exit. One of the officers near him hurried after him. "Sir, where are you going?" Agpar did not slow his steps. "I doubt hiding will help," he replied calmly. "I would like to see the thing that killed Cassie. And is about to kill me." The officer hesitated before speaking again. "You think we can't stop it?" Agpar gave a grim smile. "I'm not optimistic about our chances." They stepped outside the command building. The admiral looked west toward the Pacific horizon. The 2 minutes passed slowly. Then the creature appeared. It floated high above the base, silent and motionless, its wings drifting slowly in the windless air. Every weapon on the installation had already been aimed upward, everything the base possessed. But 2 minutes had not been enough. Not nearly enough. The creature did not approach them. One of its upper wings moved slightly. The wing separated at its tip, revealing the monstrous mouth embedded at its end. The mouth opened wide, rows of teeth glinting as blue light gathered within. Energy condensed rapidly. Then it fired. A beam of dazzling blue light shot downward faster than any weapon could fire. It struck the base almost instantly. The entire base vanished in a single flash of light. Buildings, runways, command center, soldiers, everything was erased as if it had never existed. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.